thinker and has an incredible library of more than 50,000 books and examples from the history of mankind. And he is mainly also a curator of the TED conference, TED-Med. That's a place where people regularly meet and discuss important problems of healthcare and medicine. So I'm sure that you will be surprised what he tells us. Very much welcome, and give him a warm welcome, Jay Walker. You said that I shouldn't exaggerate, and I didn't.
You did great. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's the end of a conference day where we're all looking for the answer to, in many ways, the same question. How do we have more innovation, and how can our innovation be faster and better? Ironically, most people, when they think about innovation, think about the answers to problems, a new invention, a new process. But I'm here with a different point of view. What I'm here to tell you is innovation is mostly about asking the right question. Defining the problem correctly is the core of innovation. Because when we don't define the problem correctly, all of the work we do on innovation is largely wasted because we haven't spent nearly enough time thinking, what is the real problem we are trying to solve? We see this in young businesses all the time, where we look at all of their excitement and we see what they're doing, and yet we say, that isn't an important problem. So when we look ahead for the next 20 or 30 years, and we sit and think, what are the problems that are going to matter? I'd like to tell you a little bit a different story about what I think the next 25 years are going to be about, because it's very different than the last 150 years. As Kurt mentioned, I have a library, a great private library, on the history of human imagination. And I brought some things with me, though these are not imaginative, to talk a little bit about imagination, because it's going to turn out that imagination will be the key tool you will need in order to think better about innovation. But let's imagine for a minute this were the year 1870. Not that long ago, 140 years, and we were sitting at a conference and we were saying, what is the future? Where are we going? Well, we're living at the age in 1870 of the beginning of the steam age, the steam engine, the steam ship, the great steamliners, the steam pile driver, the steam heat. It's clear that steam engines are going to run the world. We're sitting in this room and we say the future is steam. Steam everywhere. And after all, we look around and the locomotives are tying together the world, and we're sure that industrialization and nations' powers and military might is going to be directly related to the age of steam. And we pay no attention when in 1900 two small inventions emerge that seem irrelevant. One is the electrical generator, sort of the light bulb, and the electrical network. This seems like a toy, ladies and gentlemen. Nobody pays any attention to electricity when it first emerges. It's a silly little toy. And the other is this thing called the internal combustion engine. Otto Diesel invents this engine that uses petroleum products to generate power. And it's this little engine. It's useless compared to these steam engines, these powerful steamships and these factories filled with steam. That little internal combustion engine. And so if you were sitting here in 1870 or 1900, you would say, pay no attention to these little things. And of course, you'd be wrong. Because the age of energy, which we are just now exiting in many ways, was the age where we figured out how to make things and how to move things. It was the age of make and move. And the energy source of making and moving started with steam, but clearly electricity, and clearly the internal combustion engine and its forebears, the jet engine, etc., completely changed the age of energy, totally changed it. In fact, when we look back at the age of energy, we see that it was really civilization itself was electricity. In fact, the definition of civilization in the modern world is electricity. If we turn off the power, we turn off civilization. Now, what happened with electricity? 5 things changed fundamentally for everybody in the world. The first thing we did away with was, for the vast majority of the world, we eliminated hunger. Using energy we could use with nitrogen fixation, with fertilizers, we could create, and with modern irrigation, crops that were so abundant that for the vast majority of the world we suffer from too much food. For all of human history, hunger and famine were the core of what it meant to be human. They were at the center of everything. Famine with energy is gone. The second thing we eliminate is night. For all of human history, when it was dark, we went inside, we were done. Now, with the light bulb, there is no more dark. Our bodies are no more governed by the rhythm of day and night. We're up all day and we're up half the night. We pay no attention on the impact of what that means to our physical beings because we have banished night. We've banished cold. For most of human history in the northern climates, cold was the enemy. Cold is gone. We're no longer worried about being cold. And if we're at the equator, we're no longer worried about being hot because we've used electricity to make cool. Then we banish distance. Literally, we collapse it, starting with the train and then very quickly to the airplane and the car. 100 miles, 200 miles, 500 miles, 1,000 miles. Yesterday, I was in New York. Distance means very little because energy collapses distance in the last 140 years. And the last thing we collapse is half of disease. We get rid of it using energy. With clean sewers in cities, we have the capacity to use energy to live a life where infectious disease is almost entirely wiped out. All of this in 140 years because we grasped energy. And what I'm here to tell you is that last 140 years where energy, sitting here in 1900, we would have seen none of that, is nothing compared to the next 30 or 40 years. Because the age we are about to commence, which ended with this sort of symbol of the light bulb, and I noticed here at the conference it's the same light bulb. This is the symbol for the age of energy. And by the way, I also brought this to show this is how much energy, this is how much oil it takes every time you drink one of these. It takes this much oil to clean, refine, transport, and refrigerate every bottle of water. In fact, we eat energy. Every pound of beef is literally 3 quarts, 3 liters of oil in each pound of beef. The food we eat is a direct result of the energy we pour into the agricultural system, and of course, it is probably changing the climate of the world as a whole since we produce so much. But something happens that's going to change it all. And this is the core of where innovation is going, because as we all know, the world is moving towards a world of data. Now, data in the English sense is more than just storing the information. Data is the word I'm going to use for the entire information technology revolution. This idea that data could somehow be more important than energy is fairly revolutionary. Because after all, energy seems so critically important. It's like the steam of our time. It's all about steam. Why would data matter? Well, data's been around a long time. I brought from the library a cuneiform cone from 2000 BC. So in 2000 BC, when you wanted to store your data, you took a stick and a piece of clay, you made some marks, and there could be a receipt for the grain that you deposited at a granary. There's data. And then I brought with me an IBM 80-column punch card from 1960. That's not that long ago, where all the data in the world that was used in these newfangled computers was holes in pieces of paper called cards, and this was either both the software or the information. These two objects are 4,000 years apart, ladies and gentlemen, and they are the same. 4,000 years. Now, what happens? Well, here's what happens. The data, which is sitting on physical, in 1960s, moves to electronic. This is a core memory card from the first IBM computer. At the intersection of a grid of wires are little magnetic circles, ferrite cores, and when they are magnetized, they represent a 1 or a 0, depending on their direction, and that magnetic information suddenly means data is no longer physical, it is electronic. And when data moves from the physical to the electronic, it can go anywhere. It's now electrons. It's no longer atoms. It's not physical, it's electronic. And when you combine this with the processing power of this, where on a single wafer we can put billions and billions of logic gates called transistors, we can not only store the data, but we can manipulate it at mind-boggling speeds, growing every compounded rate of 20% more a year. So this is the future at one level. We know data. Now, why does data matter? Well, it turns out that with the data networks of the modern time, we can take everything that is information-driven and we can put it on the network. So it seems like, okay, I know what's going to happen. We're going to have an internet of everything, right? We're going to have all of our manufacturing, all of our cities, all of our cars, all that stuff on data networks. Okay, that sounds important. I mean, every hotel room key will be a data card. Everything on a credit card transaction will be data. Our stores will be data rich. Our phones will be data. Okay, that's not the future. You see, that's all important, yes, but that's not where it's going. Because the most important thing that is about to go onto the data network is the thing that matters most to everybody in this room. The thing we're not even thinking about. It's us that's about to go on the network. You see, living things, biology, humans, we are an information dance of chemistry and electricity. That's what you are. You're an incredibly complicated information dance. Every cell in your body has billions of lines of instructions between the mitochondria and the human DNA. And that's just the start. Because every one of those pieces of data in every one of your cells express proteins. Every gene in your genome expresses thousands of proteins. And by the way, you aren't even you anyway. You're a superorganism. 10 trillion of your cells are human. 90 trillion of your cells are bacteria. You are mostly not you. Sorry. Okay. You're a superorganism, and without the 90 trillion bacteria that cover your body and digest all of your food, that's correct, the bacteria in your body is what does all the digestion of your body. Without those 90 trillion bacteria, you're dead. And not only that, those bacteria are exchanging DNA in real time. Unlike humans where the DNA is fixed, in bacteria it is not. So you have thousands of different bacterial species in your body. In fact, you have so many bacterial species that when we began to gene sequence, read the data of the bacteria in the body starting about 10 years ago, we discovered there were hundreds and then thousands of different species of bacteria. And then we discovered that every time we take a course of antibiotics, in 2 years, the bacteria does not return to its original constituency. 2 years. I suspect that in 50 years, we will look at antibiotics as the bloodletting of the 20th century. Yes, a great progress, but at the same time, the carpet bombing of your biome cannot be a good idea. Now, why does it suddenly matter? Well, let's take it down to a real personal level. How many people in this room have heart disease? No hands go up. I have bad news. Almost all of you have heart disease. How many people in this room have cancer? I have bad news. Almost all of you have cancers in your body. Every last one. The question is whether they're going to grow and kill you, not whether or not you have them. Cancer is an information error byproduct of cell division. It is a given in all living organisms. But we are a black box. We have no idea if we have heart disease. We have no control panels. We have no dashboard. We have no feedback loop. We are ignorant beyond our wildest dreams of what is going on. And this is the great change of the next 30 years. We are not going to be ignorant anymore. You see, heart disease is the number one killer in the West. The number one reason people die in the West is heart disease. For 50% of people with heart disease, 50%, the first symptom is death. Not very good, is it? Cancer, we cannot detect cancer using current technologies until it is at least 6 years old. Think about that. Every cancer that has ever been detected has been at least 6 years old. All cancer starts with one cell error with a positive selection criteria, doubles and multiplies while the immune system pushes back. Until cancer is about 100 million cells, the head of a pin, we cannot see it. This is not good. And yet, we live in an age where new sensor technology is going to make it possible in every drip of saliva, in every drop of blood, in every breath, in every part of the portion of our bodies, we will be able to see for the very first time what the hell is going on inside of us. And when we see that, the world will never be the same. And the inventors and innovators that are looking ahead and recognize that the life sciences and the information technology worlds are about to meet, and that the speed and acceleration of change in the information tech world is about to apply to the biological world. This is the steam engine, not. This is the internal combustion engine. This is the electrical dynamo. This is the merger of two worlds that in the past had only been marginally connected. We know what a virus is, ladies and gentlemen. It's a small piece of biological code. It's barely living or not living, depending on your definition. But it hijacks the machinery of a cell, writes its instructions into the cell. There's a reason we use the term computer virus. It is perfectly appropriate. Human viruses that affect us are pieces of code. And as we begin to read the code, and I'm not talking about just the genetic code. I'm talking about the protein code. I'm talking about the code in your lymphatic system. I'm talking about the code of your neural connections. These are the basis for real change in the next century. This change is going to be stunning because it's going to be driven by imagination. We're going to be able to imagine life-changing things that have never been possible. We're going to be able to engineer crops in ways. We're going to be able to print our food, print our drugs on 3D printers. The idea that you can print life will not be silly in just a few more years. The idea that you can print food. 80% of the crops we grow in the world, 80% of all the fresh water we use, 80% of all the pesticides we put on our crops, we do to feed animals so that we can eat the meat. 80% of all the agriculture in the world is used to feed animals, not people. This is massively inefficient. This is massively wasteful. Once we can re-engineer what that tastes like, we don't need to kill 10 billion animals a month and grow them. Once we begin to understand how our body works, we can start to understand what it means to not sleep enough, what the impact of being irritated is. We can begin to read the data streams from our phones, which are the data exhaust of our life. Are you tired and lethargic? The data in your phone can tell because there's an accelerometer and a sensor that can see whether you're slowing down or moving. Are we feeling cranky or sad? Guess what? The words you say can reveal it much better than you think you can. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, the analogy I like to use is that of a car, an automobile. Imagine for a minute that everybody in this room got only one car for their entire life. You got just one. However well you took care of it or you didn't take care of it, that was your car. You never got another car. Now imagine that I gave you no dashboard on that car. There was basically just an odometer and a speedometer, but very little else, a bunch of idiot lights. That was it. And yet you had to maintain the car. Now imagine I miswired the car so that when you drove too fast, you actually felt safer instead of more dangerous. When you did things that were stupid, you actually felt smart. I think you can see where I'm heading with this. That's what you're doing, ladies and gentlemen. You all have just one car. It's you. Your body is the only car you're going to get for your whole life. The dashboard you have is nearly worthless. It's a bathroom scale and a blood pressure meter that you might use once in a while. That tells you nothing. What happens when you suddenly realize, wow, this is the car I want to keep, and these inventors and innovators are going to give me dashboards? What happens when these little sensors, which are now the Apple II of our time, the Fitbits or the Fuel Bands, what happens when these start giving me real information? Which not they're giving me not real now, but they start telling me what's going on in my blood, what's going on in my lymph system, what's going on in my brain. What happens? Let me tell you what happens. An age of innovation that makes the last 150 years look like a starter. Because manufacturing, moving, transportation, those are all good. But at the end of the day, I really care about me. I care about my children. I care about my parents, my spouse. I care about my family. And if you're going to unlock that, if you're going to show me what's really going on, and if you're going to let me start to get into the machinery, into the software code that is the life that we take for granted as a living, complex organism, then you're going to see a set of challenges unlike anything we've ever seen before. And when that information can be copied and distributed on the web, and anybody with a small manufacturing facility can make any molecules they want, it's going to be a very different world, isn't it? Scary at one level, exciting at another. You know, there used to be, if you wanted to print a picture, you needed all these chemicals, and you needed silver film, and you needed all these complex tools to take a photo and then develop it. We used to take them to photo developers after we had a company called Kodak make this very sensitive plastic film. And then suddenly, inkjet printers make it possible to print pictures that are every bit as good for almost no money in our homes or offices. And the photo finishing business, which is an industrial giant, collapses. That is exactly what's going to happen again. Only instead of the printer being a color printer, it's going to be an atom printer. It's going to print atoms and molecules. It's going to take substrates. What is food? Carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, all arranged in a very specific information dance. This information dance, which is life, is about to run headlong into information technology, into computing power with quantum computers, where a computer the size of a thing on a table is more powerful than all the computers in the world today, where storage in a cloud allows you to store everything all the time. Every bit of what you do, how you do it, what you say, this is all going to be stored because it all can be stored for nearly zero cost. So here's where I think we're going on innovation. I think innovation belongs to the people with imagination. It was an age of engineering. It's going to be an age of imagineering. The Imagineers will respect engineering. There is nothing not to respect about the ability to do good science and good technology. Those are all critical. But it's the people who imagine what to do with those things, primarily in the life sciences, that are going to lead the next 20, 30, and 50 years in ways that seem almost impossible sitting here today. But we've learned one thing about humans: expect the impossible. We have consistently confounded everybody. We now have 5 billion people walking around with computers that can be updated in their pockets, every one different based on the software you download. Every day it's different. You can wake up tomorrow and this device could be twice as good as it was yesterday for no cost at all. We live in an age where suddenly this idea that the last black box in the world, the last black box, which is us, will no longer be a black box. And we will have a dashboard that tells us what's going on, that gives us choices, and we will be able to detect the information errors that are cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's. These are just information errors down at the biological level, and we'll be able to correct them. That doesn't mean we'll be able to restore what has been lost, but it does mean that we will clearly get there much sooner. And so I argue that the most exciting thing about innovation is the fact that we can imagine what we might do with it. And though most of us are not biologists and most of us are not life scientists, I myself am not, I spend a great deal of time at the TED-Med conference, the TED Conference for Health and Medicine, talking to people all over the world about this. There are 40,000 medical research labs just in the United States alone. 40,000 labs. The National Institute of Health spends 3 times the money of NASA, but we don't hear about it. The American engine of innovation is actually being driven by this medical research, and I suspect that when you take the companies such as Novartis here and other giants who are also doing amazing work in the life sciences, when that becomes out of the back rooms and out of the laboratories and into the population, and when the vector for that is an information vector, not necessarily a drug or a pill, but actually information itself, we will see an age that will dazzle our children as they look back and say, "You did what? When? How?" And it's going to look just like this looks to us today, even though it's only 50 years ago. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.